3, 2. All right, guys, what is up? We are back with another episode of Thpstrength Season 2, Episode 2, because we deleted every podcast episode with the intention of doing more with for our specific members area, and kind of realized that a lot of people really like the podcast, and we probably shouldn't have done that, but this is how you learn. We typically throw shit at a wall and see what sticks, and the podcast stuck and we took it off, which wasn't our best idea, but we have more incentive to do it because you guys are watching it. We're getting a lot of good positive feedback, so we're going to keep doing it. Today on the episode, we have Josh Williamson. He is I guess, Josh, go ahead and introduce yourself. Give us a little bit of background, who you are, what you're doing, where you live, etc.
Well, I'm a athlete on the U.S. bobsled team right now. I'm currently up in New York, up at Lake Placid, the Olympic Training Center. I'm from Florida, so bit of an outside prospect for the sport. Generally, you get a lot of people from the area around the track, and for me, obviously, I'm pretty far away from anything cold. So I'm from the Orlando area and just kind of been into strength, speed, power my whole life, and now it's kind of all transferring over to my new sport.
Yeah. Isaiah, what's up with Orlando, man? You guys just like
great weeks, man.
So for those of you that don't know, Josh and I were actually, I think I had posted like something on my story at some point. I think maybe Josh followed me, and I was like in Orlando, and he's like, "Are you in Orlando?" And I was like, "I am in Orlando. Where do I train?" Or maybe I asked you. I can't remember what exactly happened. Do you know how did that even come to be? Like, did you start following me because of something Brad posted, or?
I remember I started you. Frankly, I'm pretty obsessed with jumping, speed, strength, any of that. I follow a lot of people this informational post, just digging into anything I can try to get my hands on when it comes to training. And one of those things that kind of I got into that wormhole through Brad and just kind of started picking stuff up on social media. I followed you because you put out a ton of really good content and a ton of information that I thought was pretty cool and really useful. So I just happened to see you were at UCF jumping. And I mean, again, that's probably like 30 minutes from my house. So I was like, oh shit, maybe I should reach out to him and see what he's doing. I didn't know if you were from that area or not. I just thought it was pretty cool. So I think that's kind of how that started.
I wish we could have connected when I was there, but I think the first time, we were I was training there, and we were trying to do a bunch of work that we ended up really not even using that much of, actually. So for those of you listening, the trip was a total waste. I probably should have trained with Josh. Instead, we didn't use any of the stuff we did, but that's fine. And then I was looking to move down there, which, didn't really make sense for us to do, but I was down there again, and you, I think, were at Lake Placid, or you had already left for Lake Placid. Yeah. But for those of you guys listening, I basically called and was like, yo, where do we train here in like Winter Park? What makes the most amount of sense? And Josh was really helpful. So it was really useful. But some background on this, coincidentally, Isaiah and Connor, I don't know if you know this, but Brad DeWeese works with a guy named Mike Stone. Mike Stone is one of the top S&C researchers, probably, I would argue, definitely in the country, I would argue in the world. He's like brilliant when it comes to strength training. His wife was an Olympic discus thrower, I believe. Is that correct, Josh?
Yeah, no, Meg's the beast. She is a pretty cool person to be around.
Yeah. So she was, or basically what happened is the person that I was working for, Mike Young, he essentially told me if I was going to look at schools, I should look at ETSU because of Mike Stone and because of Brad DeWeese. And he's like, I think you'd really like Brad. He's like pretty personable. You guys probably have a lot in common. And I was like, oh yeah, like that's nice. That's like, I'm a pretty personable, over the top person. Like, I don't know what Mike's trying to say about that, like about Brad or whatever. But then I met Brad actually because Brad came and spoke at this seminar that Mike put on, and Mike Stone was actually there too. And it was through Proformance. I don't know if you're familiar with that. That's also what Alex Natera, I think, is a part of now. But Brad came and spoke, Mike came and spoke, and obviously Dr. Stone is like brilliant. The dude knows more about strength training than most people would ever dream about knowing. Like, he's that smart. So if you're listening to this and you want to know like a lot about just specifically output, like max strength, power output, Mike Stone is the guy. You have to go read his research. And anyways, Brad, I believe, was mentored by Dr. Stone, and then Brad has a very similar Dr. DeWeese. I don't know if I doubt they'll listen to this, but they might. But if they do, sorry that I called you by your first name, Brad. Anyways, he's just like a really, really obviously super smart guy, very, very well spoken. And I really like his training stuff a lot. It's very sensible and stuff. And so I don't know if does Brad coach you, or did he coach you? What's kind of the connection there?
So he has coached me since summer of 2018. I came into the sport summer of 2017, and I was going into the Olympic year. So obviously I really didn't have much of a shot to make that Olympic team, but I was around and just kind of bounced around. And I had come from a football, team sport background where, a lot of the stuff that they implement in bobsled is very relatable to sprinting, track and field. You get a lot of track and field athletes, and for me, that was all very foreign. So I was one of those guys who, like, relatively strong, but had no idea what sprinting was, other than the fact that I would do wind sprints at the end of practice or something. So I had a lot to learn. And once I found out more about Brad, he had coached former athletes, and obviously I needed a lot of help in the sprinting department, and that's one of the things he does really well. So as soon as he asked if I would want to move down to Johnson City and work with him, I took that opportunity immediately and spent basically, I would say, 6-7 months that in 2018 going into that fall, basically kind of going from my rookie to my second year. I just went down to Tennessee and just grinded it out, and that was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah. So actually, before we get into that, a lot of the training stuff and the nitty gritty, tell us, what is your actual background in high school and college? Because you told me this, you're 24, about 215 of type 2 fiber, freak in nature with a 45-inch standing vert. I don't know if you guys know. No, I'm just playing. It's probably not that high. But I know you're strong. Any bobsled guy is going to be strong. But for those of you guys that don't know about the sport of bobsled, basically it's sprinting on ice. You push a sled, or the sleigh, I think is what they call it. I don't do the sport. Josh would do a better job of explaining this, but it's essentially track and field, like on ice. And so that's why sprinting is super important. But they tend to be like freak beast humans that look like they belong to Division I football, which like blows me away, because I feel like they even get, like, they come in and they're like pretty big guys, but then when you guys leave, you're even like bigger and more powerful. And I'm like, well, what were they doing for 4 years of football? Like, why don't they go back to football now that they're like actually athletic? No, so because the training is just so robust. And so it's one of those sports, it's objective in the sense that, track and field is objective the same way bobsled is objective. It's, you start, it's time. I think is it time from when you start the push and on your go, essentially, is how it works?
Yeah, there's splits. Yeah, so the push is really the one that matters the most. For me, we have the first, depending on the track, it can go from a 45-meter split all the way with usually like a 5-10-meter roll in all the way to, maybe 50. Okay. And it just depends on different tracks, different ramps. But then they take splits throughout the track, and that's how they usually track to see how you're doing in the race. Like we always say, you're racing against, the clock, not other people, because at the end of the day, you're going down and you have no idea where your times are at till you get to the bottom and find out, what you did. And that's so it's a pretty unique racing sport in that it is a race, but it's not like you having this constant feedback of knowing where you're at, how you stack up. You get to the bottom, you find out how you did, and then you go up and you do it again. And that's the extent of it.
Yeah. So what's there's so many connections between bobsled and track, actually, in terms of the coaching, and bobsled has a lot of very, very, very good coaches, actually. So it's pretty interesting. I would actually argue, by and large, bobsled coaches are better than track coaches, in my opinion. And that might be because I have a strength bias, but I actually do really firmly believe that. But anyways, yeah, we'll get back to this question. Tell us about your background. Where'd you, what sport did you start in? Were you good? Were you bad? All that information.
I played a lot of football growing up, coming from, Central Florida. I got into lacrosse actually when I was probably in middle school, because I was just bored after, I'd play all fall and then I had nothing to do in spring, and my parents would get sick of it. So they wanted me to find something to do. And I ended up playing lacrosse probably when I was in like 6th, 7th grade. And I played both of those sports basically throughout high school. Ended up stopping playing football to continue playing lacrosse. My freshman year of college, I went to Mercer University, which is a small school down in Macon, Georgia, kind of South Georgia, and did a year there, had a lot of injuries, got a little frustrated, ended up going to transfer to Florida State just to be a student, decided to hang it up, and then took me about a semester to realize that I wasn't done playing sports, and I started trying to find really what a good sport for me would be. What is my body type? What are the things I like to do in training? Like what are things that I really think I'm good at, and where would that fit in the sport? I was kind of went shopping for a sport, and that was honestly pretty fun because for my whole life it's been, I only identified as football, lacrosse, a little bit of baseball. I was terrible at it. I ran track a little bit in middle school, but never really went anywhere with it. So it was just kind of like I just did a little bit of everything, and then finally decided I'm going to narrow it down, and it's kind of what got me here.
Yeah. So how much did you weigh? Like, this is something I'm really curious about. For those of you that don't know, like I said, Josh is probably, what are you, 215 or so?
230.
230? Holy shit. Oh my God.
On a good day. I'm like 226, 230, kind of like
how tall? And how tall?
I'm like six, just under 6'1". I'd say I'm like 6 foot something. I don't really.
What do you say?
We measured this the other day. I'd like to say 6'1", but I'm not.
All right, so 6'1", 230-ish, right? That's like what's like Ezekiel Elliott? Does anyone know off the top of their head what he is? He's like huge.
He's right around there. The only reason I know this is because I saw that video of Aaron Donald just manhandling that guy, and then everyone thinks Zeke's really small, and I'm like, no, that guy's my size. Aaron Donald's just a giant.
Yeah.
We were talking about this the other day, actually.
What is he? So he's the same, you said? Ezekiel Elliott?
He's just about, yeah. I'm pretty sure he's practically the same height and weight as me, but you look at him in the field, he's tiny,
And real quick, could you say what you're like, how strong you are in all like the main lifts, like all the power, like the Olympic lifts and like squatting, deadlifts, all that?
Yeah, so I'm really snatching. I just started. I'm pretty bad at it, if we're being honest. But power cleaning is, I'd say, the predominant lift that we do in our programming. Some athletes do full cleans that come from an Olympic lifting like background. They really like it and they're good at it. For me, power cleaning is something I really enjoy, and my current max is 160 kilos, which is about 350 pounds. Just and then my squat, I don't think I have a 1 rep max squat right now. I would say that I'm at like my best double would probably 210 kilos, which is just, I don't know, what's that, like 450, 460, I would say on the squat. But that's kind of been a build for me. I've always squatted and power clean, something I really liked to do when I was in high school even. I thought that gave me a pretty big edge in lacrosse, because lacrosse tended to be a lot of really small kids who would just kind of finesse their way around. And the way that I thought I'd get recruited was to be bigger than everybody else and just kind of manhandle people on defense. And so I got pretty obsessed with weightlifting when I was in high school and kind of run with it ever since. I was pretty bad at it when I started, but I've kind of stuck with it since I started. And those are two lifts that I really like, and luckily are a big part of my training. So it helps me really enjoy what I do.
Yeah. How high do you catch your cleans and how deep do you squat?
Just, rule of thumb, obviously with powers, I try to keep it over 90 or I wouldn't count it. And then generally though, like my 160, I think I have it on my Instagram, and I think that was pretty high for me. I've gotten sometimes pretty suspect in the power position, but that one was pretty good for me. And it was actually perfect because I was leading into world championships over in Germany about a week beforehand, which is, ideally what you want, going into a competition and starting to hit big lifts a week or two out, going into a taper. So that was pretty exciting. But I think part of it too, we were in this kind of old East German weightlifting hall. They had these pictures of these like Olympians lifting these crazy weights all signed off on. So that definitely, everybody had some PRs that day because it kind of added to the atmosphere. But it was definitely, talking about Doc Stone, it was a pretty Doc Stone environment, mustaches, big cleans, lots of squats.
You guys have to see this guy's mustache.
Yeah, so
it's the best ever.
It's amazing.
Awesome. It's like the best mustache ever. But he's just like, he's like very like, he's a really nice guy, just like the nicest guy, but he's just like very well spoken and just super into it. Like, I hope that I'm as cool as this guy is whenever, I don't know, how old is he?
I'm not sure. Every time, it would always, my first time down in Tennessee was always surprising because they had the lab down in ETSU. Like, we have a weight room that we train in, and they have the lab that you do the mid-thigh pulls and the weightlifting team trains in, and a lot of stuff where they do a lot of their testing. And I remember walking in there for the first time, and I saw Doc and Meg working out, and immediately going in there, I think I saw Doc doing like, wasn't a ton of weight. Obviously, he's an older guy, but he's probably like 60, 80 kilos doing like ass to grass back squats. He's classic for walking around the lab in just spandex and a t-shirt because he's like between lifting and like working on stuff in his like office, and like he's just walking around like crushing full snatches, and he and Meg are working out together, and I'm like, what is going on in here? I had no idea who he was at the time, and he's in there just crushing weights, and I'm like, I'm where I need to be. When I saw that, you know, I was like, it's pretty hardcore. This is where I want to train.
Yeah, it is a really cool, like, unless you've been around the sport of weightlifting, you like don't really know kind of the way the culture is, and like it's just like very, I don't know, it's just like almost like I don't give a shit about anything other than just like being a beast, essentially. Like I'm just like, that's the only thing that matters. I only care about training. I'm in the weight room like 4 hours a day, just sitting on the freaking metal chair, and everything's covered in chalk, and it's usually dirty. Like it's just like a really cool environment, unless you've been around it. Isaiah, I don't know if you've ever trained in like a OTC or at like a weightlifting gym or anything. I doubt Connor has for sure, but
I haven't, but my dad, because when he was doing Olympic lifting in college, like I was there when he would train with his team and stuff like that. So I like know of the environment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is really cool.
Just those open rooms, just platforms, you know,
Yes.
like squat racks you pull off and on, you know, it's like, and they're in ETSU, the lab is in like old racquetball courts. So these like massive, no windows, just like wooden platforms, compilation of random weights, you know, just like it's a pretty cool environment. And I just definitely, that was my first memory of Doc Stone, walking in and seeing him crushing back squats, you know, full depth, you know, just blowing it up. Some old guy walking around in spandex, and I'm like, this is the right place to be.
So he's
ready to go to get strong.
He was born in 1933, which makes him, I don't even know, 20, what is it? It's 2020.
It's like 87 or something like that.
He's 87. He's 87 or 88 years old. That's crazy.
And they're doing full range back squats, blowing it up with he and his wife. And I'm just like, there's some pretty crazy stuff. You see some old pictures of Meg in her prime. She was amazing. I mean, I think she still has a record that holds in, I can't remember which throwing event, over in Europe somewhere. I can't remember. And she also has a collegiate record in the U.S. that I think still stands since she competed in college. So, I mean, she was a dominant athlete on top of, you know, being married to a legend Doc. So, I mean, it's about as power couple as it gets when it comes to strength conditioning,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool story. So again, for those of you listening to this, you're talking about someone that is literally like the father of, in the U.S., in my opinion, of very high level periodization type, you know, research stuff that's really, really good stuff. And if you're not familiar with, you know, how we or why we program the way we do, and you've no clue why we're doing what we're doing, you definitely should go start by reading some of his research. I think it's public. I think a lot of it's public as PDFs on Google Scholar. Him and Brad, I think, published a couple different ones that were like, literally, it's like part 1 and 2 of like the basics of periodization. It's like a really, really, really solid articles. So highly recommend, Connor, maybe that would be something, Isaiah, if you guys haven't read that, I'd highly recommend doing that if you're interested in the training stuff, which obviously you guys are. So, but anyways, yeah. So back to kind of your progression. I know we never really answered this question. How much did you weigh along the way from high school all the way through kind of now? And at what level, or actually, you never even told us this either. What were your sprint times, or what are your sprint times like? And talk about the progression of your weight and your speed and things like that as you've gone.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd say I got in the weight room probably sophomore year of high school. I'd kind of gone, like, you're playing football when you're in middle school, and like your team has, like, you know, you go to some gym and your whole team works out there with some trainer. And like, I luckily had a guy who named Marlon William Moore. He was a former Maryland linebacker and a former Orlando Predator, like, arena football player. So he just happened to be a guy that worked with our football program. He started doing some of that stuff, and I always regretted. I never really wanted to go. I didn't really enjoy weightlifting. I was just like, I was always a little taller. I was probably, you know, getting close to 6 foot when I was getting closer to high school, and I was still like $160 or something. I was pretty skinny, and then I just was starting to fill out, you know. And like, finally, when I got to the weight room, I just started really filling out. And essentially, Marlon initially just had me running programs he did in college. You know, he was a linebacker at University of Maryland, and I was just training like a collegiate linebacker, and that essentially put a lot of weight on me. Just hang power cleans, squatting, you know, just things that none of it was with great technique, but stuff that I was new to the weight room, so I was seeing a lot of gains fast and I was putting weight on quick. So I was getting a ton of instant, gratification and return on that. And I'd say I got up to probably in my senior year of high school going into college, I was 215.
Two what?
And that was 215.
Okay.
That was when I was about 215. And then going into college, I stayed around that weight. Because in lacrosse, it's hard to put on weight. It's a field sport. You do a ton of conditioning. I loved weightlifting, but I absolutely dreaded, the wind sprints at the end of practice and the constantly. I'd have a great sprint, down the field, have this great run, and then it'd be like, I'd be gassed. I'd need to sub. I couldn't do it. That was something that, eventually when I talked about picking a sport out, I decided, hey, I hated some aspects. I loved the sport of lacrosse and football, and I loved football. I hated some aspects of it though. And I was like, let me find a sport that I love everything in the training process. I love everything about it. I love the sprinting, jumping, weightlifting. There's nothing I don't like about it. And that could be, a great way to not get burned out as quickly, was what I thought at least. But yeah, I was probably around 215 in senior year of high school through college, and then about that weight really going into the sport. And then really since then, the past 2 years is when I've tried to get up more into the 225 to 230 range, just because that our sport's a downhill sport. At the end of the day, I don't want to get slower because I need to push fast. But once I get in the sled, we want to be as heavy as or close to our weight limit as we can be, just for momentum. More weight we get in that sled, the faster we're going to go down the hill. So it's kind of just that balance of get as heavy as you can without getting any slower, and just finding where that's at for different athletes.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that the size part of it was that important. I didn't know that that more size meant you would, obviously you have more momentum. I didn't even think about that aspect of the sled. So you want to, that's why you're 230, to get as big as possible. What do you think your your 40 time is right now, 40 yard? If you had to measure it the way the NFL does, how do you think you would match up?
I wish I could tell you. I get asked that a lot, really, because that's kind of just the general metric, with speed. Obviously, it's a very easy thing to, compare to. We do 15 meter, 30 meter, and 45 meter sprint differently, obviously, so it's not always super comparable to obviously track and field. You're coming out of blocks, or you can fly in or roll in. We do a meter box, so it almost turns into a meter roll, I would say. So that's going to help our time, and I think my best 30 time from a crouch meter roll is a 356, and that's kind of the only number I really have, I would say, sprint wise.
So you have a 1 meter.
I could probably convert that to a 40-yard time, but it'd probably be something ridiculous that probably wouldn't be true. So I don't want to put anything out there.
Yeah, the roll in with the roll in though. So the thing is that is interesting about the NFL Combine. I don't know if you guys know this, but the way that they do their 40-yard dash is it's based on their first movement for the start, and then it's a laser finish. So it's this half on, half off laser timing system. So you have a guy that stands right there and goes on your first movement. Whereas bobsled and track isn't really like this. Track usually uses a hand pad. So your first movement, you move the hand, you start measuring, or you set up a fly gate basically right on your foot, and then when your foot moves is when the gate triggers. Some people will do a half meter fly, which is literally 2 feet or a foot and a half, I guess. And then when you cross the laser beam, it starts measuring. So it's kind of different, and each of those distinct differences, in my opinion, makes such a huge difference. If you even go from a crouch to a 3-point and a hand pad, you could add half a second, in some cases. If you go from a meter fly to the hand pad, it could add 0.3 to 0.5 seconds, on a time, which is crazy. That's like taking someone that runs a 4.5 in the 40, and all of a sudden they're 5 seconds in the 40. And you're like, hold on, how the hell did that happen? Give them a hand pad. But the issue is that you have these standards that are set up by kind of the norms, you know what I mean, of the sports that are popular in the US, and football is one of those sports. So, it's weird to try to make those comparisons. But for those of you guys that don't know, when I was at Altus, I would say, for those of you guys that don't know, when I was at Altus, there was a sprinter, Andre DeGrasse, second fastest guy in the world. His coach was Stu McMillan, who actually came from bobsled, I believe, or did it for a while. And so there were a couple bobsled guys there, skeleton guys there, or whatever. But I think Andre would, in the 30, I want to say he would run 3.5 or to 3.3 or something like that. Something maybe faster. It might have even been 3.2. It was so disgustingly fast I could not conceptualize it. Because if I did the test, I would run barely under 4 seconds in a 30. and Andre would just blow that out of the water by like you'd have a 10 meter gap by the time you got to the 30, and I did. You know what I mean? If you were to put us side by side, like that's how blisteringly fast he was. And it was interesting because you had a guy, Javid Best, there who came from UCLA, was a football player, right? Moving into track, one of the fastest guys in college football, going into track and field. And he would actually stay with Andre for the first 30. Like he would stay with Andre for the first 30. Sometimes he'd beat him out of the blocks. Andre would start to gap him probably around the 30 meter mark. Like he would start to separate at the 20 meter mark probably. Like he just had another gear. As he got more momentum, he got faster, and Javid didn't get as fast as Andre was, which is kind of a hard way to say it. But it was interesting to watch that comparison. And then you look at guys like you, where Andre DeGrasse weighed 150 pounds. You weigh 230. That's like disgustingly huge. You look at Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott's probably
he's 225.
225.
Yeah, 225 at 6 foot.
So it's basically the same.
6 foot, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a close.
So you look at that and you say, and you're talking about a guy that probably is maybe borderline less leg than you are, I would argue. But your whole job is to push a sled as fast as you possibly can, as hard as you possibly can, and basically you need to run fast to do that. So you do a ton of sprint training. That time is, I would assume, if you were to be from like a 3-point, you'd be around, I would guess you'd probably be around probably just under 4 seconds, like 3.9 to 3.8 high, I would say, right? Maybe something like that. I don't know. You'd have to test, but I would say probably right under 4 seconds or something like that. How fast are there any other guys that are in your group that are like just even way faster than you at that size? Or I know there's a guy I DM'd you about. I was like, who the hell is this guy that just like is a fucking freight train of a human?
There's last year, for example, a good I think indicator is like we had a guy last quad who's named Sam Mcguffey, who's obviously known as, he's a very, very fast guy. He played, I think he went into the NFL very shortly. He played at Rice in college. He was a really good football player. And the reason most people know him, I think he had a highlight tape that went viral. I think in high school, he was like jumping over people. He was, hurdling people as a running back. And like, he was one of probably the fastest guy that's probably ever come through the program for us. He was around, I want to say he was mid 3.4s. That's the record for 30s, a crouch start 30s for us with that meter roll, with that meter box that we started.
Sam Mcguffey?
Sam Mcguffey. And I'm sure he has a 40 time somewhere just because
he did spend time in the NFL. Does Sam Mcguffey have a 40-yard? What? What? Dude, it says he ran a 4.32.
He is lightning fast. Like, that is one of the fastest people I've ever been around.
But, okay, let's read.
Fast person I've ever been around. Universally fast.
So just for perspective, this guy, for those of you guys looking at this guy's a freak of nature. He is. It says here that he's 225, which he's probably about 6 foot, right? 225. Says he runs a 4.32.
Yeah, he's a little short.
Says he runs a 4.32. He logged a 42-inch standing vertical, which is in the combine probably like a 39 or 38. He probably fudged his reach quite a bit. Do you know what his vertical was there?
On the board here at the Olympic Training Center, he has the record, and I want to say he's 41, 42. And that's with the just jump and the vertex. But again, it's like you can do, it's not with plates. So it could be, he has the record on our like Olympic training board.
And you guys
42, we have a guy right under him, I think 40, and then 39, I want to say, are the 3 records right now. Like the top 3 we have.
You guys are pretty rigorous about the reach, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as much as you can be, I feel like the reach is pretty hard. I don't know much about it. I did verticals when I was probably in high school, and since then it's all been like force plate. There's always some twist, or I have like my arms on my hips, or like very rarely have I gotten, and I don't think I don't think a lot of us do that, just other than for like testing purposes. But I want to say they're pretty rigorous, but I haven't been up through that process,
Yeah. Dude, that's crazy. What was your best standing in high school with a Vertec, or when you did it last?
36 was my best with the Vertec, with the slap, I think. Yeah. when
So
that was junior high school football. I want to say senior high school football.
yeah. Isaiah, Connor, what is yours? Isaiah, what's your standing?
Mine is 36.
36. Isaiah's muted, I think, so nothing he's saying is coming through.
My best one ever was 38.
38. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I want to preface that's my PB is 36. My average day is like 34, 35.
Yeah. Mine now is like so pathetically bad. I think so in college when I was at the OTC, I think when I started training again, I took like a year hiatus from like anything track and field related, maybe longer. When I started, I did it in weightlifting shoes. And I think it was 29 inches was what my standing vert was, which was horrendous. Like, you're talking about someone that dunked when they were 14. I was like, my standing vert's so bad. And like, I was power cleaning 235. I was squatting, like back squatting ass to grass, like a little over 300. Like, I mean, I had no reason to be jumping 29 inches as a jumping athlete that had done plyos their whole life in high jump. And then I like just repped it out a bunch. Like, I just did it every day to see. I did it as a sense of like, and I'm sure you guys do this, like auto regulation in a sense, right? Like, you're like, oh, I just want to test on the day and see how we're doing. And I think I got up to like, it took me like 2 months and I got up to like 36, or like consistently it was like between 34 and 36. So it went up fast just by practicing it, but it was pretty horrendously bad. So just for perspective, what did you say his crouch start was, so we can kind of get a ballpark on your 40-yard dash and probably what it is?
I think he has the record for our program at I want to say like 343, low 344, mid 34, like 343, 344. I would say.
You said yours is like
350 my PB. Yeah.
Okay, so you'd probably run in the 4.4s, which is like that's crazy. You're fast. You're probably faster than Ezekiel Elliott at his size. Why aren't you playing football? Why are you not playing football in the NFL?
The Cowboys could use you.
They could use. Yeah, they should have just kicked it. But we get that question a lot because we get a lot of, we have a lot of guys who come from football or even guys who, have gone through Sam's a great example of that. He was a very good football player. He just personally, I know he had a lot of concussions. He was, even at being a big dude, he's a smaller guy in the league. And, they put him at slot. You take some big hits even in practice. And then next thing you know, you don't want to take – you just don't want to get your head taken off anymore. But for us, for me, for example, I always liked football. I played defense. I was a strong safety, but I was never going to be that good at it. I always thought I was an athlete, but obviously to any sport, football, basketball, lacrosse, baseball, there's so much skill involved. And I know that I was never the guy who could make some ridiculous catch. I was pretty strong and fast, and that has a ton of, role to it. And, I can pick up the speed of the game and think logically on the field, but like there's so much to it. And I think a lot of these guys, like we look at NFL, NBA, these guys are amazing athletes. I don't think that makes them the best athletes in the world, but it definitely makes them the best athletes in the world at what they do. You know what I mean? I think there's definitely some physical beasts, and I think you can find a lot of those physical beasts in track and field, weightlifting. A lot of these guys are monsters too, but you get to a sport like football, basketball, those require a lot of skill, and that's obviously it's going to be hard to be really, really good at something unless you're really good at that sport. You know what I mean? And I know that maybe I could be a really good athlete compared to NFL players, but I'd never be as good at football as they are. You know what I mean?
I don't know if we've talked about this yet, John, but I mean, I've trained quite a few NBA athletes in person now. And like the impression I get is just it's all about arm length and your ability to put the ball in the basket. It doesn't have so much to do with your athleticism. A lot of them are like awful athletes compared to like Isaiah and myself. Like we would be top tier NBA athletes if we had the skill to play in the NBA.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's kind of the experience I've had as well, like working with the track and field guys, because like I'm on the other end, right? Like I'm the guy that's like I only work with freak beast humans that like produce a shit ton of force fast, and I love it. I think it's fun as shit. That's like the flashy stuff that you see in every sport is usually the result of that. And you have a couple examples where it doesn't happen, like DeAndre Hopkins. He's kind of slow, but his hands are the size of dinner plates, and he's just like, catch that is my fucking glove. Like this is like a baseball glove, and I just have these mitts. But you kind of see that quickly, that what makes them the best at what they do is that they're the best at what they do. And, that's specificity to a T. You put Andre DeGrasse on a basketball court and it's embarrassing. It's trash. And, you know, you put Isaiah on a track and he's not trash, but he's not going to run a 4.4 like you are probably, you know, and so it's like people, I think, don't make there's this big disconnect in their head that, oh, well, and I mean, I just made this disconnect too, but I was kind of curious. I'm like, dude, that's world-class speed and world-class size. You don't see that. That's the type of size and speed that you run people over without even thinking twice about it. You know what I mean? And so I think, you know, there's definitely a place where it is, yeah, you have to do it. You have to do the sport you want to get good at. And we talk about that all the time in dunking. Like, I mean, you guys, what is the biggest piece of advice you guys give Isaiah and Connor?
Oh, jump.
All the time. That's it.
Jump, and jump. It's like I get a DM literally every day, and it's like, how do I jump higher? And I'm like, jump higher, and that's my answer.
Yeah. Which is, yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting. But so this is maybe we'll get into the training stuff here because we don't have we weirdly don't have that much time because there's so much background here. But what are in terms of your training and stuff like that? Tell us like a little bit about the setup. Tell us about how you got that world-class speed. Are you developing it more? Do you feel like you've gotten much faster? Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously I kind of said it earlier, but I went down the rabbit hole pretty hard when I got down to East Tennessee State. You know, I mean, working around Doc Stone, you know, Brad, working with so many great coaches, you know, it's just kind of like, I definitely started getting really obsessed with learning that process. Because I was always already so into the weight room and I was so into just physical performance. And then you mix that with actually getting around people who, you know, dig into the research, do the research themselves, you know, like are so knowledgeable in these fields that it was just a perfect storm for me to really obsess over this stuff. And that was something that I think I definitely got a lot faster, like objectively. I came into the sport running, my 30 was a 368. And then that following summer, after working with Brad for a couple months, it was a 356. And a lot of that just, again, was I didn't know what sprint technique was. If you asked me what a good sprinter did, I just said they ran fast. Like, I don't know. I didn't know what made them fast. I didn't know what I should be looking at. And that was obviously something that I just learned a lot quickly with Brad. And that's something we worked a ton on. I mean, obviously a lot of sprinting, very similar, I think, to what you've said. It's kind of we do a ton of basically Monday, Wednesday, Friday are high days for us. I sprint in the mornings, take a quick break where I'll nap, eat lunch. Then we do weight sessions in the afternoon. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday tend to be tempo. You know, like today for me would be a bike tempo day, just to reduce impact. Tuesdays tend to be more of a jogging midsection tempo, you know, 100-meter jog, do some midsection work on that end, 100 meters back, do some midsection work over here.
You know what that's
turn
called?
Into a quick little circuit.
This is interesting. That's called big circuit. I think at Charlie Francis, like big circuit or small circuit. Is that what it's called for you guys? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We call it midsection tempo. Essentially, that's really we just dub it that. And then I have bike tempo today. Saturday will be a bike tempo again. Just spin for 20 minutes at a low intensity. Do some midsection afterwards. Take care of the body. And I definitely notice a huge benefit. It's funny because I'm always very motivated to train because I love doing it. But when it comes to like tempo days, until I really understood the why behind it, man, I hated it. I mean, my motivation to train, I'd wake up Tuesday and I'd be like, man, I don't get to do anything cool. I don't get to sprint. I don't get to jump. I don't get to lift. I just have to jog back and forth and hate my life and, get way too tired just jogging around doing nothing exciting. And the motivation was so low and I used to get so frustrated with myself about that because I'm like, I just wouldn't want to do it. And then the more I've understood by reading into some of Charlie Francis' stuff and just asking Brad or bugging him about why I have to do this when it seems so counterproductive, the more I've learned about it and the more I've bought into it, the more I've actually seen a lot of benefit to it and really setting me up better for the Wednesday session. The days I wouldn't do tempo Tuesdays, I'd show up to Wednesday and I'd be way more stiff. I wouldn't feel as open since we're doing more like fly-ins and upright stuff Wednesday. I feel really tight and blown up. Days I do my jogging. And after a couple of weeks, I noticed being way more fluid, upright running, being way less stiff going into sessions later in the week. And that was enough for me to, really start buying into that and seeing the importance of it. But that's kind of the general gist of our training. It's really nothing crazy. Every time people ask Brad about it, it's just kind of like nothing exciting. It's kind of like sprint in the morning, lift in the afternoon. Monday's a push day. Wednesday's a pull day in the weight room. Friday's a bit of a mix of both, but a lot lighter, just like a speed focus. And then Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or a lot of tempo stuff and low intensity, recovery work, and Sundays off. And that's kind of just the way it goes.
Yeah. So you guys, for the tempo work, out of curiosity, what type of answer did Brad give you for that?
Well, at first, knowing Brad, at first, if I'm going to ask him the day of why I'm doing something, he's going to tell me because I told you so. But when I actually get the right answer, it's because he explains, it's the foundation. I remember asking him, and once I really understood it, bringing it up to him like, hey, I feel like I'm actually understanding the benefit of this. And he says, I think I have in my text somewhere, but it was really something that was I thought was pretty good quote. It was literally just, it's the foundation for everything. The tempo work, it just builds the foundation for the high intensity stuff you want to do. It's like the foundation of the house. You can't just pile on all this crazy training and all this just crazy amount of impact and these, tons of sprint volume if I'm not taking the time to work on that low intensity work. And I just never understood that. He's like, that is the base and the foundation of our program. And if you don't take it seriously, then it could come back to bite you, in form of injury or, overtraining, not getting the most out of training because you're tired, or you're stiff. It really can add up there. And I just personally have seen a big benefit in my upright running, just from a fluid standpoint, just doing some barefoot grass jogging on Tuesdays, that just really opens me up. And it took a little bit of, reality check to get to that point because for a while there, man, I hated it, but it's gotten a lot better. And I definitely see the value in even the stuff that may not be my favorite in our program.
Yeah. For a while there, I was doing quite a bit of it in Isaiah probably has a very similar. How do you guys feel about the tempo work that I programmed for you, Connor, when you did my programs, and Isaiah when I put it in there?
Well, you want to talk about the first time I did it or now?
Let's hear each of your perspectives on this, because I do a very similar thing in my training, and people love to bitch. They love to bitch. Why do I have to do this? There's no point. Well,
so the first time I trained with John and he had me doing like lower intensity jumps and like plyometric stuff to warm up, I was just like, why? It was kind of like why am I doing this when I could just go try to do a brand new dunk that nobody's ever done before and just do max jumps for 2 hours? Like, what's the point? And then also pre that, I would just have very intense days followed by basically nothing, and then just very intense day again. And when I first started doing all that tempo stuff, I was dead tired. And John even told me, he was like, I don't know if this is a podcast safe, but he basically told me to stop being a pussy and that I was super weak. And I was like, thank you for that.
I look at my perspective. I'm like, look, I'm not that good of an athlete. I'm really not. I'm not. But I know what hard work is, and if you're bitching about this, you're just being soft. This isn't even that hard.
Yeah. And I don't know if I was necessarily bitching, but I was just like, dang, John, I am so sore. I am so tired. And it's I feel like I'm not even doing anything. And he's like, just do it, man. It's gonna be fine. Stop being a pussy. But now that I kind of understand the same thing, that I'm building a foundation, it really doesn't bug me now. And also because when I first trained with John, I was not very interested in the process. I just wanted to be better. But I didn't understand anything. So because I didn't, I was just this is kind of lame. But now that I still have a long way to go in my understanding of things. But now that I understand more, I'm definitely much more open to doing things and just trying them to see what the actual effect will be on me. I know everything is not this direct. Oh, just if I want to jump high, all I have to do is jump. I know it's not as simple as that.
Yeah. Isaiah, your feedback?
Yeah, no, I related to what Josh said when the motivation is low, when you got to do a lot of that, like the running work and the tempo work and all that stuff. But it honestly takes me back to like high school when I used to have to do conditioning for basketball, and they put you through the most stupid running workouts ever. They don't really translate, and you're unmotivated for it, but you have to just show up and do it. With this, it's that similar sensation. It's you just got to go in there and eat it. You got to suck it up and just and it's different now because now I know it's helping me, and I know how it's helping me. But I think that's a huge part of training. If you want to be elite at anything, there's gonna be things that suck that you're gonna have to learn to do. You gotta be comfortable being uncomfortable, and it's a big mental challenge, but you just gotta learn how to overcome that.
Yeah, I feel like for those of you listening that want to just bitch about the Tuesday, Thursdays, just get over it because it works. It obviously works. For perspective, his 40 time probably came in at like 4.5 high. Now you're probably like, just so people have some frame of reference. I mean, you drop 0.12, right? That's how fast that is. Yeah, like that's like going from a 4. That's like when you're going from being already really fast. You're already running like a 4.55, which like Zeke put out in the NFL Combine. Maybe he was 4.50, and then you're like, hey, listen, I just went to a 4.42 or 4.43. You go from a 4.55 to a 4.42. That's like millions of dollars separating if you're in the NFL. Like,
yeah, I was gonna say that earlier. I don't think people understand like that's a huge difference. Like it's a small number difference, but that's a big difference. It's like people saying like if Zay goes from a 48 to a like 49 vert, that's a big deal. Like it's.
Josh, do you know anything about what their verticals are? Do you have any clue like what their approach vertical is? Did you see anything? What's your perspective on the sport of pro dunking and what we do? Are you like, this is lame, this is cool? Like, what's your perspective?
I think it's sweet, man. I mean, literally, I follow so many people on Instagram that are not, anything to do with my sport, or that I just think I'm obsessed with speed and power in whatever form that comes in. It comes from football, track and field, dunking, basketball, anything. I follow a guy, I want to say it's Stephon Jones, and he puts out some amazing content with fast bowling, and it's just kind of like really cool stuff. That's just, if it has to do with moving something really fast with a lot of force, I'm probably going to love it. So, I mean, anytime I see the videos, I'm like anybody, I challenge you to find anybody who doesn't think watching somebody lay down a ridiculous dunk is cool. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know anything about it, but obviously it's sweet.
So, like, do you date? Are you familiar with, like, women? Because they generally think it's, like, the weirdest shit ever.
Yeah, dude, you just have to find volleyball players. They appreciate dunking.
Yeah. My girlfriend's on the Canadian bobsled team, and she is equally obsessed with, like, speed power, so I can just completely nerd out with her, and that's a big part of it for me because that's something that I'm sure I told her I was doing this, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if they know that I can talk about, training and speed power for hours. I'm obsessed with it. It's like, no, if they don't know, they'll probably find out pretty soon because she's used to me just rattling off some research I just read or, talking about how my training went, how her training went. But it's pretty much anything to do with, jumping high, running fast, moving heavy weight. I'll probably like it.
So, and we'll kind of have to end on this because I think Isaiah has to go here pretty soon. But tell us about some of the testing that you guys do at Lake Placid and at ETSU, because I think I posted this on the story the other day of you doing the mid-thigh isometric pull with the force plates, and like that shit is awesome. Like you see it and you're like, this is sick. This dude's literally just like taped to a bar. Like Brad always says, he's like, yeah, it kind of looks cavemanish. Like we just got duct tape and we just duct tape their hands to the bar so they can hold on because that's how much force their legs are producing. And like go to the power position, just push like as hard as you can. And people are yelling and it's just like sick environment. So yeah, talk about some of that specifically, or if you have other cool tests that people don't see, definitely tell us about that.
Yeah. So testing, testing from a monitoring standpoint, we do weekly jumps. We do counter movement jumps right now. When I was down at ETSU, we had a much more rigorous testing when it came to jump testing. Every 4 weeks, we would do static jumps with, we'd have like a PVC over our back. So we'd start at 90 and a pause. We do those unweighted with the PVC, weighted with 20 kilos, and then weighted with, I want to say a bar that was 30 or 40 kilos. And then we would do the same thing, counter movement, with it over our back. So really it took no arm swing. We would do that. We would do that every 4 weeks. We would do static jumps unweighted every week as a check-in. Like every Monday would be right before we started our speed session. We would do some jumps on the force plate. And also the mid-thigh pull you talked about, every 4 weeks we would do that on our pull workout. It would just substitute. If I had clean pulls that Wednesday, we'd pull clean pulls that first week and just do the mid-thigh pull. And that would be the testing that we would run every 4 weeks. And then from that information, with the jump testing, mid-thigh pull, body composition testing every 4 weeks. They did a ultrasound of the quad. They would basically run across and look at, I guess, from my understanding, limited understanding, cross-sectional area and, and stuff like that, which is pretty interesting. They'd get a pretty good picture of the direction training is going, essentially. That was kind of the monthly check-in on top of the weekly jump testing. And then that was how you really knew. And that was a big thing that Brad pushed, was like, hey, I'm not just going to tell you I know what I'm doing. I'm going to, if we're not going in the right direction that we want to be with your sprint times, your jumps, your pulls, we'll see that and we'll know what we need to change, because it just validates the process at the end of the day. It's not there to tell us what we need to do. It's just there to tell us if what we're doing is working, and then if we need to make changes or if we don't. If I'm getting closer to competition, I should hopefully be jumping higher, hopefully be jumping faster, hopefully be pulling more RFD, even if I'm not. And if I'm in, a volume part of my strength training, maybe I'm going to see RFD a little blunted, and that's okay as long as you have that context that this is just an early time of the year. I'm going to feel fatigued. I'm in eights. I'm in volume. I'm going to be a little beat up, and that's just not, it's hard, but try not to freak out when, you're not feeling great. But that's that time of the year that it's okay not to feel great, and it gives that context to feel more comfortable with that, knowing that that's changing as the year goes by. Numbers are changing, and I'm seeing changes in hopefully the right direction.
Yeah, I think, what you talk about, like, this is why Mike Young said this the other day in a post. He was like, if you're not testing, it's because you're afraid of the results. And if you're afraid to do poorly, then if you're not testing, then it's really just you're afraid to get the truth. Like, the truth hurts. Like, you're afraid to know. And you should use that as a way to equip yourself. And I think, like, a lot of people don't realize the stuff that you guys are doing. Pat Dickard said this. This is the guy that dunked from the free throw line. He works in China now with, like, Chinese basketball, and he posted it. He was the one that reposted, I think, it. And he was like, this is so cool. Like, they're basically getting force numbers down to the decimal point in a very objective way, where you're collecting 1,000 data points a second or more, on this specific lift, and you're able to see the changes over time in terms of comparison month to month and things like that. And then for you annually, you're seeing comparisons year to year probably, which is, super useful for us. We really look at the specific testing we do is we'll do power clean, we'll do squat because we don't have access to a force plate, and we'll do specifically approach jumps. We don't even really look at counter movement jumps standing or from the static position, because it doesn't have much bearing on what we do. We see a lot of correlation between, your back squat going up and you getting better at jumping, specifically with Isaiah. And we also see a lot of correlation in the power clean too. You see those numbers go up, your body weight doesn't go up. You generally see, improvements. I guess, Isaiah, have you seen examples where that doesn't happen for sure, right?
Not too much because a lot of the guys that are pro dunkers that have good training, though, like, their squat usually is, like, very correlated with their vert going up. The only exception is 1 foot jumpers, to be honest. But for a 2 foot jumper, like, I honestly don't think I've seen a case where someone truly got stronger in a back squat and a power clean and their bounce didn't go up.
Yeah, which is crazy interesting, because, like, if you look at Mike Stone's research, he published this, I think, 2 years ago or a year ago. He was talking about intent and how if you push intent and you go as hard as you can every squat or every clean or whatever, he's like, your type 2 to type 1 ratio changes. Doesn't matter. You don't gain more you gain more volume of type 2. You don't get more type 2 fibers. You don't go from 10 to 100, but the size of those gets so much bigger relative to your type 1, and that only happens if you push intent. And so this is why I always tell people, like, you're driving the weight up, you gotta drive it up hard. Like, you gotta push the weight up hard. And the numbers were staggering, and I think they did it 4, 8, and 12-week assessment. And you see the numbers for people just casually going through lifts versus pushing intent, where people are yelling at you, push, 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 every single rep. And I think Brad did this. He used to grade it like 1 to 10 or something like that, right? And talk about it. And it was like, that's crazy. That environment is absolutely insane. Like, unless you see it, you don't even have a concept for it. Imagine if you're listening to this, imagine if every single time you went to do a squat, a clean, I don't know if they do it for RDLs and stuff too, like for the accessory work. Did they do it for accessory work?
It depends. I think there's obviously, depends, I guess, in my opinion, the goal, in my understanding, the goal of the work, you know what I mean? When it came to movements like squat, clean, pulls, mid-thigh pulls, every rep was to move as fast as possible. Even when it was heavy, you got to know it was not knowing the weight's not going to move fast, but I got to be putting into the bar like I'm trying to move it like 1,000 miles an hour. Even if I'm only moving really slowly because it's a really heavy squat, that intent in the weight room was the most important thing that was harped on by, Brad, by any of our coaches, Ambrose, the coach up here in the weight room, and like Placid, that is the most important thing that they talk about is intention into the bar.
Yep. And it's crazy because a lot of people don't understand the value of that. And yeah, you can have velocity and BBT and stuff, and like I think that's great. Just purely because I don't care what the number says. There's a number, so it's either fast or it's slow. Like,
Intention. It helps a ton with intention. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'd say that
comes
on
down
Fridays, like on my lifts that are a lighter lift, it's definitely the most important for me because like you get like the days where it's a little more heavier sessions, like Monday, Wednesday. You know, I can generally that intense a little for me at least easier when the weight's heavier. I'm definitely trying to move it as hard as I can because it's heavy, you know. But on a Friday, we have lifts that are way more in like the 70-80% range, way more about moving lightweight fast to try to, you know, pump that transfer up. And when I've had, you know, used a VBT device on those heavier days, it never mattered much to me. On those light days when it's, you know, it's sometimes hard to see the value of, you know, like having a lightweight and moving it really quickly, that VBT device would help me a lot just because of it. Like you said, it spit a number out and I would have something that I'd be trying to beat. You know, I'm like, all right, this set, my PB was this many meters per second. I want to get over that this following set. And that just gave more intention to move even faster. And by doing that, you know, it just pushes that process forward. And the intention of that workout is hopefully met, that, you know, move that weight as fast as you can to try to transfer that strength to speed, you know.
Yeah. And I think like what's really difficult, and this is a big discrepancy between what you guys do and what we do, is the tendon issues that we have are crazy. Do you guys see a lot of Patellar Tendinopathy or Achilles tendinopathy?
Last year, my first 2 years ago, I was down in Tennessee that whole summer. I did pretty well. I kind of had off and on shin splints just from my high school track was cement. So when I did run track or do anything, I was just blowing myself up every single day. So I always kind of dealt with some shin splints. But last summer, I struggled a lot with patellar tendinopathy. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea what it was. That's one of those things that I just assumed, hey, I squat a lot, I'm going to have knee pain. I squat and jump a lot, it's just going to happen. I assumed it was general knee soreness because I never heard of it. I let it go for a couple months, and then it got, you know, August time, we're getting close to competition, and our sports med, I finally went and told someone, like, hey, I'm 23 years old and I have to go slow up the stairs. Like, I feel like I should tell somebody something was going on. And we looked into it, and I had to basically start from scratch with isometrics, heavy, slow resistance, and pull myself from training going into some competitions, which is really hard, you know, mentally for me. I see my numbers going down, you know, my strength is going down. I'm getting more pain. I'm sprinting slower. I'm pushing slower, not jumping higher. I don't know what's going on. And then it all came down to the fact that I just didn't know that I was dealing with a tendinopathy. And then finally, with the right treatment, now going into the summer, I have completely reduced it. I've done a ton of, you know, isometrics have helped me a lot. Obviously heavy, you know, being mindful of how many impacts I'm taking. I have pretty weak lower legs, so trying to, you know, work on my, you know, my ankles and my arches, just trying to strengthen that up for my contacts. And then a lot of that has helped me a lot, but I dealt with that a ton last summer, and a lot of that just had to do with me just not paying attention. You know, I think coming from a team sport background, it's one of those things you're like, all right, I'm going to be sore and I'm going to have pain and I just need to deal with it. But some pain is okay, and other pain, you know, you got to know the difference between I'm sore from a workout and I'm having knee pain, you know.
The thing that makes tendons so difficult is that it limits your performance. And Isaiah can speak to this. I can speak to this. Connor can speak to this. We've all had it. And it's limiting. That's the issue. It doesn't matter if you're sore, if it's not limiting. You still punch out numbers, you know, and your knee or your muscles don't get necessarily more sore. It doesn't get worse. But tendons get so much progressively worse as you push harder that it actually limits your performance, which is really the difficulty. Yeah. So I think it's funny what you said. The reason we're all going this is because, like, we follow those exact, you know, type of progressions and guidelines and stuff according to research. Like, yeah, and it's funny. You'll see that the people that follow the scientific evidence usually have hard numbers they can pump out and say, this worked, this didn't work. They test, they lift heavy, they do and it's like you said earlier, like what we do, you tell people what we do, it's kind of boring. There's no wow factor to what we tell you. It's something you've probably heard at some point.
It sucks.
And people are like, you know, and that's like, I always say this, like, I'm all about the fundamentals. If it's boring, it probably works. Like, if it sucks, it probably works. If it's hard, it probably works. Like this, I mean, within reason, you know, like, and I think that's been my brand because that's what the research indicates. So, like, yeah, people get better. I think when you looked at Connor's new to what we're doing here, and before he was working with me, he saw all these decrements in his numbers, a lot, big decrements early on. And then all of a sudden he leaves, backs off the training, and his vertical goes to like super high numbers. And,
insane. Yeah.
And you look at that and you're like, hold on, like, well, he's doing his training. He's doing something else. It must be the new thing that he's doing. It's like, or it's this months of training that he did prior to that.
Yeah, but now we're even further down the timeline, and the detriment of that has shown also. Like
not doing it.
Right.
Yeah, I think like if you were to look at the payoff or the payout, and you can attest to this, right? Those periods that suck are followed by really great performances, but they're followed by great performances. You don't have great performances while it sucks.
Correct. And those great performances are worth the sucking because it's so much better than you were. It's just, it feels insane. Like, I can't even describe it.
Yeah.
So,
and that's, the hypertrophy, you get into a volume stage, you're not gonna be as poppy. You're gonna feel tired, you're gonna hurt, and that's, and that scares some people away. I know we have coaches, Brad's one of them, Ambrose up here. We've had athletes who will work with them. And then, they're in June. Our sport happens from November to February. In June, they're sprinting slower. And they're like, oh, I don't need to work with this coach. Like, he's making me worse. And it's like, well, you're doing 10 reps in the weight room. Like, you're not going to run fast. You're going to be sore. It's going to happen. And then once we get closer to competition and you're getting to low reps, higher weight, way more advanced plyometrics, because you put that base in early with the more volume, with the depth lands, with the easier plyometrics, and you built to the fun stuff, then you're going to see, like you said, this huge benefit. Even going through a taper, like that taper going into competition, sometimes I feel terrible, because you're going from pretty heavy weight all the way to really just no stimulus and rest. And then once you get through that and you catch that super compensation, you feel amazing. It's like you don't know what happened. But next thing you know, you're PRing every number, and that's ideally, with a well-guided training process, that's how it should hopefully feel. But it's just hard to fight that feeling when you feel terrible, but you're telling yourself it's worth it later. But generally, I think with most things, that delayed gratification generally indicates something better is going to happen. Putting off the instant gratification tends to lead to something bigger. I think in almost any instance, I would argue.
I'm going to start using that as one of my core values. I really like that. Delayed gratification in terms of everything is always better. Investing is a great example.
Generally, in most anything, I would say
money,
probably
relationships. Like, I think that's true. I think there's actually a little bit of research on impulsiveness and poor decision making, which is why Instagram's so bad. If you guys have seen The Social Dilemma, if you haven't, you probably should watch it, and the polarity that it causes and your ability to be irrational and illogical, by the way. So anyways, I think we covered like a ton of great content here. I know Isaiah has to leave. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show. If you guys are listening to this, make sure you guys, if you can, subscribe to the podcast. We also put these up on YouTube. Make sure you guys like and comment on the video.
Say your Instagram.
Yeah, what's your Instagram, Josh?
Oh, okay. Instagram is J Williamson USA. That's for Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. That's pretty much all my accounts. It's all the same stuff anyway. I'm pretty bad with social media, to be honest. I'll post PRs or cool pictures or something, but other than that, I'm not very good with it. But it's all the same stuff, and it really just a lot of stuff that I love to do, mostly lifting and sprinting, to be honest.
You definitely should post more, because people like me will be able to so eloquently share with the rest of the world. No, I'm playing.
I went and followed you on Instagram like a few minutes ago, and I watched your video at the 407 squat for reps. It's freaky.
Yeah.
Go check it
also,
out.
just so you know, if you ever want to come dunk, we're here.
Hey, if you ever
I'd love to try.
Your sport,
I don't know. I feel like it'd be pretty bad.
No,
I still don't think I can dribble without looking.
Yeah,
ball,
you just
so
dunk off vert.
Really
It's easy.
that
So he can't dribble. He has no basketball skills. Don't worry. We coach people just
negative basketball skills.
All right.
That's how we warm up. That's about it. We'll go in the gym and, miss a lot of threes and then go in the weight room.
Beautifully said. But yeah, thanks for doing that with us, bro. If you guys are listening to this and you're looking for jump training, this is our our plug, as always, Thpstrength.com. If you guys have other suggestions for people you want to have on the show, you can feel free to comment that too. Other than that, guys, thanks for listening. Josh, thanks for coming on. Oh, last thing to close this off. Are you going to be a Winter Olympian? Are you what level are you at right now? We didn't even ask this.
That never guaranteed Obviously, as you know, it's always, year of the games is when you find out who makes a team. Right now, I'm hoping so. I've raced on USA 1 and 2-man and 4-man the last 2 years at World Championships, so it's hopefully looking good. I just got to maintain spot essentially, and that's something that we have ranked sleds. You got USA 1, 2, 3 down the line, and ideally the top 3 sleds will go to the Olympics if we can qualify them. So as long as keep chugging along, stay healthy, hopefully getting better every year, and hopefully representing the country at the Winter Olympics in China, if those even happen. So a lot of what ifs, but the plan is to hopefully be a winner. But,
that's sick. Yeah, definitely. Anyways, guys, we'll include that in the title because we didn't even talk about that and why he's relevant. But, yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Peace out.